It's nice to meet you, man. Yeah, you too. You're from Ohio, right?
Due west. It's Iowa.
Iowa. Doing good.
Good evening, greetings to the 3 million residents of the state of Iowa who are all constitutionally obligated to listen to this show, Rock Hard Caucus. This is the 120th episode. Recording date is September 11th, 2023. It's my birthday.
It's Justin's birthday. I was supposed to be the one to say that. You're not
I should have given you space to acknowledge. Well, all right. Now I come across as conceited. So should I cut that out and then I'll just say recording date is September 11th, 2023.
You don't have to. I think it's fine.
Oh,
yeah,
fine.
Keep it rolling.
All right. Oh, well, there's nowhere I would rather be on the evening of my birthday than right here recording a podcast with my good friend Evan. Thank you for being here, Evan.
You're welcome.
And tonight we've got a special guest. We've got Emma Schmit. Hello, Emma. Welcome to the show.
Howdy. Thanks for having me.
And I've got some info on you pulled up. I don't know if you'd want me to read that, really, but you work for an organization called Bold Alliance, right?
That is true.
What do you do with them?
I am an organizer, and essentially with my job, I focus entirely on the carbon pipelines, not only in Iowa, but Nebraska, Minnesota, Illinois, the Dakotas, as well as a little bit dabbling in federal level stuff and California and Louisiana.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big territory. Yeah.
Yep. And with that, I mean, a lot of it is working with landowners that are impacted by the pipelines, legislators, and also a lot of the legal side of things. So we've got a number of lawsuits and we've got all these state agency hearings. And I am not a paralegal, but I'm saying I am on my resume. So
you're basically doing the work of a paralegal without the training, maybe?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. I also double as a travel agent. I book a lot of flights for expert witnesses. So I should say, don't ever try to go to South Dakota because their airport infrastructure, non-existent, impossible.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I've ever flown into South Dakota, but I've always been within driving distance, so I hadn't needed to.
You could get there faster on roller skates, honestly, than a plane.
Yeah. So the work you do is specifically organizing people to oppose these pipelines. I've recognized for a while now these pipelines are like a major issue, but I feel some like distance from the issue. So I feel like I never have fully grasped like what all is going on. There's so much involved in this. So I guess let's start with the very basics. What is the intent? What is the stated intent of the pipeline that is like most in focus right now, the proposed carbon capture pipeline? What is it supposed to do?
So these pipelines are part of a larger scheme known as carbon capture and sequestration. And what the goal there is to solve the climate crisis. Because instead of, having polluters actually reduce their pollution, they would rather be able to capture these emissions from the smokestacks of a polluting entity. So they capture the carbon from, in our case, an ethanol plant. You also hear about it a lot with like clean coal. This is the clean coal technology. Yep. And once they've captured it, they'll sort out any of the other gases or mixtures, and then they will put it into a pipeline, a highly pressurized pipeline. And in that process, because of the pressure, the gas converts into a liquid, and then they transport that liquid thousands of miles here in the Midwest, either to North Dakota or Illinois. And they claim that they'll be storing it underground because we're just taking carbon from the air, putting it underground, boom, no more climate change. Perfect. Does not actually work. It turns out, I know that's surprising. And what we've seen right now, so there's actually 13 existing carbon capture and storage operations up and running in the United States, and 12 of those actually use the carbon for enhanced oil recovery. And enhanced oil recovery looks a lot like fracking. They take the carbon, inject it in the ground to get like the last remaining dregs of oil out.
I see.
So that's really where a lot of the profits up until about 2018 were with the industry. And now, thanks to a number of moves by Congress, they have really just escalated the tax credits and funding that's available to carbon capture projects. And so you make a good hunk of money if you just put that carbon in the ground. We have never really gotten a straight answer from any of the companies that are proposing pipelines in Iowa on whether they actually intend to just store it or if they'll be utilizing it in some other fashion first. We do know that, like the Summit pipeline, for example, when it was first announced, their founder, Bruce Rastetter, a man we all love and adore, right?
We should talk about him. Yeah.
He is on the record up in North Dakota saying that like they only need these pipelines for the enhanced oil recovery because this is going to help keep fossil fuels alive in North Dakota. But turns out that's not a very popular use. And after a while, that just kind of disappeared. And now they deny ever wanting to use the carbon for enhanced oil recovery. So it's really what they're going to do with it. Nobody knows. What is the purpose of these pipelines? To make money off of our tax dollars. It's just to make a couple wealthy white men even richer, which we love to see, right?
But the PR element is that they are capturing the pollutants from ethanol plants, like you said, and just putting it underground. So
exactly.
This is a scientific question. How much carbon gas fits inside of the Earth? Do you know? Do you have a figure for that?
I could make one up for you. I have no idea. That's the problem too, is like the few long-term studies that exist on this technology, the carbon doesn't stay underground. Like it slowly leaks out. And so you're really not solving any problem unless your problem is that you are a wealthy white man that needs more money. In which case, check mark, that problem is solved. But otherwise, no. And I mean, on the ethanol note, that is one of their big PR moves, just claiming that without using carbon capture technology, the ethanol industry is it's going to die. They're in dire straits, after having the most profitable year on record.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that ethanol's lifespan is limited, right? Like it's probably not going to last forever. So is the carbon thing just like another technique for just like elongating the use of ethanol, just like life support?
To some extent. I mean, I don't think it'll really make a big difference in the long run. For one, a big chunk of the money that comes from this project is through the low carbon fuel standard. Like that's California, Canada, a few other states are considering it or just enacting it. But if you look at California, I mean, every report that they've been putting out lately, they don't intend on increasing the use of ethanol or anything like that. And it's really, they're actually going to be lowering the funding that they can get for trading the low carbon fuel credits for ethanol. So it's a bit of a mess. And really it's all just talk is kind of the key takeaway. They make a lot of claims, but none of them really stand up to any scrutiny, especially when we're in an era where, ethanol it's not really popular outside of the Midwest, honestly. I mean, and here it's really only popular because they've had a massive campaign for years to ensure that people use it. I mean, we saw, what was it, last year or the year before, where Governor Reynolds mandated that we have to have E15 at our gas stations. I mean, you would think for a product that everybody loves so much, we wouldn't have to mandate it. It would just naturally happen. But what do I know?
Yeah, forced sales wouldn't be necessary, I wouldn't think. Well, I mean, I think we talked about this when we had Chris Jones on the show, but like the only reason anybody buys ethanol gas is because it's cheaper, it's slightly cheaper. And it's
Right.
only
Yep.
slightly cheaper because it's heavily subsidized, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so
Which, if the ethanol industry were to die out, which really I think they're already starting to make the transition from providing fuel to everyday folks to fuel their cars, right? And really looking deep into jet fuel. So that is kind of the next step. In fact, Bruce Rastetter just announced a plan to build a jet fuel production facility down in the Gulf Coast. So that is definitely on their radar. And I think we'll be seeing more and more of that. And let's say jet fuel fails, then you can also end up converting these pipelines to carry whatever you want. I mean, you could put anything from hydrogen. Hydrogen is talked about a lot, which we all know, very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could fill it with Lucky Charms. There's really no limit on what you could transport through it.
That's an interesting idea. So would I would assume they would have to be like in milk in order to transfer like Lucky Charms.
I was going to say, you want to
that?
transport the gold. You don't necessarily want to transport the charms. You want the pot of the gold at the end of the rainbow. We should probably talk about Bruce Rastetter and who he is and what his role is in all of this.
That's where I wanted to go next. I don't want to let this slide by entirely without comment. We are recording on 9/11, and there was just a lot of talk of jet fuel. So listeners, make your own connections in your head. We don't necessarily have to connect those dots for you, but just note, we are talking about jet fuel on 9/11. So Emma, who's Bruce Rastetter?
Well, I've got a really quick sidebar, and that is if
It's
you
about jet
read,
fuel.
it is. Well, it's about ethanol. So Summit had to provide testimony for the current Iowa Utilities Board hearings that they are going through in order to get a permit to build this pipeline. And they made note, one of their executives did, that ethanol is crucial to national security in the United States. And the way I take that is to mean we need to be blaming ethanol for, everything that's gone wrong. In fact, it wasn't like SEAL Team 6 that killed Osama bin Laden. It was ethanol. It wasn't, Osama bin Laden that crashed into the World Trade Center. That was ethanol that did that. I mean, they could have stopped it. They could have, but the industry just didn't care.
The ethanol industry is responsible for all of our safety. And they have failed time and time again.
Let us down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Would there have been any ethanol in jet fuel back in 2001? Probably not.
I don't think
right?
so.
Right.
I don't think so.
However, the helicopter that SEAL Team 6 flew to Osama bin Laden's secret house, that may have had ethanol in it. That was only, 12 years ago or so? Mm-hmm. There was ethanol around in gas then.
Yeah,
it does
spread
burn
this conspiracy.
That's a win for ethanol. Ethanol is responsible for the death of Osama bin Laden, which impacted all of us greatly as your average, everyday Iowan citizens. We were all much safer on that day once he was brought to justice, long after his heinous crimes were committed.
Thank you, ethanol. God bless.
All right, so Bruce Rastetter, I first became aware of that guy when he was appointed to the Iowa Board of Regents by Terry Branstad, I think. I think he was appointed when Branstad was still governor. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what is he? Where did he come from? How did he make all his money?
Oh, boy. So Bruce Rastetter got his start back in the 90s with hog confinements. I mean, he really built up the factory farming industry here in Iowa. And I mean, to this day, he still has, I think he owns almost 700,000 hogs still. So still a pretty big player. But he did sell off a lot of his assets way back in the mid-ish 2000s, early 2000s, because he got into the ethanol industry. And so he went from hog confinements to ethanol, which ethanol is a benefit to hog confinements because you're producing all of this corn. And so not only do you get cheap feed prices to feed your livestock, but a lot of ethanol plants also, the leftovers from the process of making ethanol can be used to feed livestock. So all around, it's like a perfect tie-in because no matter what, he's making money or, not losing any.
Well positioned.
Yep. And from there, he was in the ethanol industry for a while here in Iowa, ended up selling his business. There was a small little affair in Tanzania where he tried to displace 160,000 refugee farmers, which was not great. Fortunately, it's actually his position on the Board of Regents that helped put an end to that. We were able to stop that because it was just such a terrible PR crisis, and he tried to use his position on the Board of Regents and with Iowa State to move that project forward, which backfired spectacularly.
So this was a project that you said would displace 160,000 farmers in Tanzania. Is that what you said?
Yep. Refugees. Yep.
They were refugee farmers.
Yep.
What was the project that would have displaced them?
It was called Agrisol, and I would just highly suggest, looking it up. Dan Rather actually reported on it.
Tonight, Trouble on the Land. The story of Agrisol, an American company trying to develop a massive farm in one of the poorest parts of Africa. Is it a good deal for the people of Tanzania or a land grab?
So there's, a lot of good stuff out there. The Oakland Institute really did a great deep dive report on it back in the day. And it's been helpful because it like at that time, folks in Iowa said, he's taking people's land in Tanzania right now, but it's going to be our land here next. And What do you know? That's actually exactly what happened. I should also mention a lot of his money is also coming from ethanol in Brazil. So he owns like the largest ethanol plant in Brazil. He's actually got a couple of them. And it's really interesting how they say that we need this technology to keep, ethanol alive in Iowa when Bruce is also our biggest competitor, really, because he's providing all this ethanol from Brazil. So it's really just a fascinating series of events. But he's got, I
didn't realize it was such an international industry. They make it sound like it's by Iowans for Iowans.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it is just as fake as everything else they say.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. We know kind of where he came from, how he made all of his money. How is he connected to the carbon capture pipeline projects now?
So Bruce is actually the founder of Summit Carbon Solutions.
Mm-hmm.
It is a subsidiary of Summit Farms, which is like the overall business he has, or Summit Ag. And with that, he has really used all the political connections that he's gained along the way through his agricultural ties, ethanol ties, everything else. He's got Terry Branstad brought in as one of his advisors. He's got, folks from that like helped take people's land during the Dakota Access Pipeline. Same vice president of land acquisition for Dakota Access now works for Bruce. He's also, of course, used all of the profits that he's made from taking other people's lands and whatnot to influence the political process, donating over $1 million to politicians, largely in Iowa. Governor Reynolds alone, I want to say, has taken over like $300,000 in her time. So he is not afraid to use his money where he can.
I saw some of the recent news about this was that they had uncovered several emails between Kim Reynolds and Bruce Rastetter, just constantly trying to set up a date to meet to talk about these pipelines. Do you think that maybe the amount of money he's donated to the governor has some impact on how easy his access to the governor is, how often they talk to each other? Do you think that there may be some direct correlation?
Are you implying that Governor Kim Reynolds could be corrupted by money? I've never.
Most politicians would not ever, would never give any favors in exchange for political contributions. But I'm saying it's a possibility.
I mean, I would go out on a limb and say, yeah. That is certainly, although, I mean, it's not even just the carbon capture pipelines that they have had a relationship going back for years. Same with Branstad. I mean, there's actually a clip somewhere out there where Rasseter basically just bosses Branstad around and tells him, like, you're going to call me and we're going to talk about this. And like, it's just, the man has immense influence.
So he's the boss of the elected officials. It's not even like a partnership. It's like,
Yeah, pretty much.
You answer to me. Wow. Okay. So he's the real tyrant of Iowa.
Absolutely.
One of many. I guess I want to ask about the on the ground response to this, because obviously in order to get these pipelines built, it requires a lot of different parties to consent to it in one way or another. So obviously we've seen some heated meetings between representatives from Summit and citizens. So I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yes. Really quick tangent going back to the emails, though. I don't know if y'all read all 800 and some pages of that request, but I did.
I read about one page. Sorry, just one.
The best nugget in there is that Kim Reynolds and Bruce Rostetter were supposed to have a dinner date in, I want to say, 2019, and she had to cancel because she forgot to vote. She did not vote in the election, and so she had to run back to her hometown so she could cast her ballot, and so she couldn't have dinner with Bruce because of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's good to know that even the governor, you can't just. You would think that she could just stick the ballot in whenever. But there are rules that apply even to her.
She's not a hypocrite about wanting to restrict absentee voting. She's standing by that. She does not absentee vote
in person on the day. Otherwise, it's not a real vote.
But yeah, so as far as on the ground, it has been really, really interesting watching just so many different folks that you wouldn't really ever consider to be allies in anything coming together to oppose these pipelines. Summit has really, I think, struck a nerve with a lot of Iowans, not only, and folks across the Midwest in general, not only because everybody kind of sees this for what it is. It's just more corporate greed and corporate control trying to dominate our lives, but also because these pipelines are incredibly risky. They can be lethal. I mean, carbon dioxide is an asphyxiant. If you were near a rupture site, which we always know that pipelines will eventually fail. I mean, if you are within 750 feet of a 14-inch pipeline, you have 60 seconds to get away before you die.
Okay, so, that's a longer distance than I was aware of.
The pipelines in Iowa are 24 inches in some cases,
even worse,
even
than that.
bigger.
Yeah.
Yep. And so folks are really upset about that. And Summit is, of course, downplaying it, saying that, there's never been a recorded death from a carbon pipeline. Well, yeah, sure, because the technology is fairly new. It's not really well established. So why would there be when there's not much of a presence at this point?
As we know, infrastructure decays over time, and they're not going to spend the money to maintain it safely.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Right.
I mean, Summit's never built a pipeline before. So what do they even know about maintenance? And then the other issue, of course, is property rights. Summit has applied for the use of eminent domain, claiming that because this will create temporary jobs for out-of-state construction workers, it will help the longevity of the ethanol industry, and it will fight climate change, that this is a public use and a public necessity, allowing them to take people's land without their consent. And I think that's something that resonates with a lot of folks, but all of those issues together have just culminated in this massive opposition that I don't think we ever really anticipated. And we've just been incredibly successful with it. Summit has now been denied their applications in both North Dakota and South Dakota.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll see the same happen in Iowa. I have a feeling our oversight agency isn't quite as intelligent, I guess, as the Dakotas are. But
oh man, that is hard to take. Worse than South Dakota.
I don't. You know what? We've got the airports, but they've got the good board members.
Yeah. I mean, South Dakota is often one of the few adjacent states where I feel like I can look down on their government as compared to ours.
Well, they produce more energy than we do, so they probably have more people who are from that side of things. Right,
more literate in this kind of thing. Yeah.
One of the issues in like South Dakota was that they have a real belief in local control, and a number of counties passed ordinances that would have put like setback distances from towns and the pipeline, because we know pipelines are dangerous. At least these ones are. We've actually seen the same thing here in Iowa, where I'm going to say 7 counties so far have enacted ordinances that would restrict where the pipeline could go. Summit, of course, has sued most of those counties because they're, good guys, always fighting for everyday Iowans. And what led to part of the denial in South Dakota was the fact that their proposal did not abide by these county ordinances. They were not, like, their route would have just completely disregarded these, local level laws. And so the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission up there, said, if you can't follow the county ordinances, which you can't with this proposal, then you're out of here. And so it's really good stuff. I mean, we know they're going to apply again, but it's going to take them some time to come up with a new route and everything else. So
yeah,
it's a major win.
It's nice to see some, authoritative board actually, exercise some authority over, these corporate proposals. Where is this pipeline supposed to go, like through Iowa?
So it has like a main line, but then it also branches off into a number of different areas. But a lot of it is focused in like western Iowa and kind of like the northern half. It goes up into Minnesota, over to Nebraska and South Dakota. I want to say there's 29 counties that are impacted by Summit.
All right.
But of course, Summit isn't the only proposed pipeline. There's also Navigator, which basically cuts the state diagonally from the northwest to the southeast. It follows like the Dakota Access Pipeline route in a lot of ways, and actually will be crossing the Mississippi River pretty darn close, like almost right next to where Dakota Access crossed, which, say the pipeline ruptured right where it goes underneath the Mississippi River, I'm sure that's going to not have any consequences with Dakota Access's oil pipeline. It'll be great. No worries.
And that's fine if that all goes into the river, right? Because the water will kind of dilute it all. And so it would be sort of a built-in protection there.
It'll just acidify the water and kill all the fish and like wildlife, which who cares?
Yeah, we're not wildlife, so it doesn't impact humans.
Yeah, we're fine. Not wild. It'll be great. As long as Bruce Rostetter remains wealthy, we're all going to just be happy. And that's that. There's also a third pipeline, and that is the Archer Daniels Midland. They're an ethanol company. They have partnered with Wolf Carbon Solutions, which is a Canadian company.
I've heard that one before.
Yep. And they're building like a 300-mile pipeline from eastern Iowa over to Illinois.
Okay. Yeah, has Wolf Carbon been involved in any of these other like large pipeline projects? Because I don't know where I encountered that name before.
They were pretty big up with the Alberta trunk line in Canada. I don't know if that's it, but they are very interesting. They have spent the most out of all of these companies on lobbying in the Iowa legislature, which I think is fascinating because you really don't hear them mentioned as much. I think Summit kind of just sucks all the air out of the room. But I mean, they're behind the scenes working hard. And same with Navigator on the federal level. Just since I want to say like late 2021, they've spent over $1 million lobbying Congress. So they are, I mean, big money is what we're up against. So the fact that we have anyone at all is just really a testament to how great the opposition and the dedication of the people opposing these pipelines is.
Yeah. And you mentioned that go ahead, Evan.
Well, I was just going to ask what the what's kind of the federal government, what's their input on this whole carbon pipeline situation?
Yes. So I will say, I don't think all of this necessarily started with bad intentions. So, I mean, we could trace kind of the government's interest in carbon capture back to, I think, the late 1970s, early 80s, but it really started steamrolling around 2008 under the Bush administration. They created this tax credit called 45Q. And with that tax credit, you got a certain amount of money for capturing carbon and either storing it or using it for enhanced oil recovery. And then in 2018, we saw with the bipartisan, I'm blanking on what bill it was. It was a major one.
Inflation reduction or the infrastructure?
That comes next. The bipartisan infrastructure bill. It was the infrastructure bill. Yeah. That introduced trillions of dollars on the table for this industry, from all sorts of different grants and funding opportunities to putting in a ton of money into new research and development for carbon capture. And then under the Inflation Reduction Act last year, we saw the tax credits that they can get for capturing carbon grow even larger. And in fact, I think you can actually even get it in direct payments now. And the absolutely wild thing is they get it based on how much carbon they capture, right? For every ton of carbon they capture, they get a set amount of dollars, potentially. Nobody's actually monitoring how much carbon they capture. Nobody is there investigating and auditing to make sure they've actually captured any carbon.
So they're self-reporting.
It's just rife for fraud. Yeah.
That's wild. Because I was thinking about do they just put it in a balloon and they just provide samples? This is how much carbon we're collecting. Government, take a look. But they don't have to really show any proof.
No, it is just absolutely ridiculous.
I'm curious how efficient these carbon capture things can possibly be anyway. It seems crazy that they're just pulling it out of the air in mass quantities like that. Has there been any studies on how much energy it takes to pull it out of the air?
Yeah, there have been. And in fact, it is not efficient at all. It turns out that they end up emitting, in most cases, more greenhouse gases than they capture in the process, because it takes massive amounts of energy in order to capture and transport everything else with the pipelines. But also it involves just absolutely unimaginable amounts of water. So they use that to, in certain cases, to scrub it, and also to just keep the mechanical parts of the equipment from overheating, keeping it cooled down.
Yeah.
We just saw in Iowa that Summit put in an application to withdraw. I want to say, they've put in a couple applications wanting to withdraw anywhere from 27 million gallons of water per year to 55 million gallons of water per year for each ethanol plant. And they have, in total 31 ethanol plants across the Midwest. So you're talking billions of gallons of water just for a technology that doesn't even work. It's bonkers.
Yeah, where would they be getting that water from? That seems like a lot of water. Yeah.
Yeah, so there was just a big article about Microsoft using Raccoon River, which goes through Des Moines. They kind of in secret, I guess, are basically using that water to cool their GPT, basically what is the basis for the Chat GPT bots. So another completely useless thing that they're using our natural resources for.
Yeah, I think that they're saying they're saying it does one thing, but it's really doing another, and it's only serving a purpose of driving wages down.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, it is really just on brand for Bruce Rostetter, because I mean, if you look at it, he's been in the confinement industry for most of his life, and a massive amounts of water are required for hogs. For every hog, you can calculate that they use around, I mean, the numbers vary depending on their age and all of that, but on average like 2.5 gallons of water a day to keep a single hog alive. So you multiply that by Bruce Rastetter's 700,000 hogs that he has here in Iowa. And that alone is, I mean, almost 7 million gallons of water. So he's, kind of like Iowa's own personal Nestle. Like he is no problem constantly just taking resources from others.
And that's 7 million per day gallons, right? I think that was the math you did.
No, 7 million per year.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. I have a liberal arts degree, man.
Me too. Yeah. I don't know any of this shit.
I don't have a degree.
But regardless, pigs, they require a lot of water.
700 million. Yeah, 700 million a year. So yeah, just especially like long-term use. Long-term use, like, is that what we want our water resources going to? Or do we want to have, clean drinking water for the people of Iowa, which in many cases isn't happening. I mean,
we're already
look
failing
at Des Moines
at that.
Water Works. Yeah, it's just priorities are out there.
Yeah, we can use our water to keep a pig alive long enough to then kill it, or to move hazardous gases through the state. So we were talking about how this has attracted opposition from a surprising variety of people. You talked about the safety concerns, and you talked about eminent domain. Have you met any, let's say anyone who makes under $100,000 a year? Have you met any person in that demographic who thinks that this pipeline would be good?
No.
Okay. It's kind of what I expected. So we're talking about people from vastly different politically ideological bents, leanings, are joining together to oppose the pipeline. So have you met any really weird eminent domain cranks in your work? And I mean, I guess I probably shouldn't ask you to be insulting the people you're organizing with. So let me clarify. I say crank as a positive. I love cranks. I myself am a crank in many ways.
Yeah.
There are a lot of characters of all kinds in this fight, and I enjoy every minute of it. But on the topic of, just strange bedfellows, I had lunch with Steve King.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Never anticipated that one. But he is staunchly against the abuse of eminent domain. I think that's where our common agreements end. But I'll take it, I guess. It's definitely interesting. I wasn't ever really planning on hanging out with a white supremacist, but if he offered to cook a hamburger for me, I guess I'll take it. Although I will say I requested a cheeseburger and he gave me a hamburger, but that's neither here nor there.
Did you request one of those fancy liberal cheeses on it? Is that the problem?
Just Kraft American singles. But yeah, I mean, it's really a really broad variety of folks that are coming together. And I mean, yeah, you definitely hear a great deal of differing opinions, and you got to do a lot of biting your tongue, because really, I think what this is about is, not just, meeting people where they're at geographically, but also politically, and being able to understand why they feel the way they do about all sorts of issues. And so it's really interesting to hear, kind of just hear from outside my own little bubble of how people view different things. And really, I mean, a lot of this stuff has the same kind of common bond of they are against corruption in our government. And it's yeah, I'm right there with you. But then next thing I know, they're talking about how it's all the communists' fault. And it's okay, well, we diverted courses there, but it's a good start. We'll work on it. And you know what? I think the conspiracy theories they come up with, fantastic. I wish I was that creative.
Do you have any good examples?
Yeah. Did you know, I learned this from Congressman King.
Oh,
that,
boy.
Larry
I've heard a few of his.
Larry Fink and George Soros, very
that's
wealthy
right.
men,
That's
of
where I
course,
thought this might be going.
Yeah.
they have attained immortality. They will never die. They have found the secret to everlasting life. And Steve's not jealous. He doesn't care that they've managed to live forever, because that's a sin, and he will live forever at the side of his
in
Lord.
the kingdom of heaven. Yeah.
Wow.
This is like real. Like, he genuinely believes that George Soros has unlocked immortality on Earth.
He said it on stage. You can watch the recording. Yeah, it was.
I've not ever met Larry Fink or Klaus Schwab or George Soros, but I know a lot about those guys, and they're buddies at the World Economic Forum. And when you take the smartest brains in the world, and they think they are, and they think, by the way, they are an immortal generation too. They believe that they have enough science, they can figure out how they're not going to age, and so they want to live forever. And they want to live forever with all of the power that can be accumulated. Now, if you're an atheist, and you say, death's a void, it's the best I can hope for is a void at the end of my life, you're going to try to come up with some other way to be immortal, aren't you? I don't have to do that, because I have faith in God. He's going to take care of all of that, and I don't want to make any decisions for him. And I don't want to sit in judgment at the pearly gates on any of these people that I'm about to talk about. Although I wouldn't mind having a seat on the 50-yard line there in a bowl of popcorn to see how they invent it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I read his book for the podcast, so I feel like I got a pretty good insight into like what's going on in his head a lot of the times, but he did not broach the subject of George Soros' immortality in the book. So that's a new one to me. That's exciting.
I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but he did give me a signed copy, so it's on my shelf.
That's unfortunately a very easy conspiracy theory to disprove. So, like, as soon as George Soros is up there in years, so man, I wonder how they'll react to that.
That theory's got a shelf life.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean, it's still true as far as we know. Man's still alive, so
That's right.
Well, and
I'm a believer. I'll buy it.
Even when he dies, it's like you and we're never going to see the body. So like,
that's right. You're right. That's what they'll do.
That reminds me, we were talking about Bin Laden earlier. The same kind of thing with him. You know, they dumped his body at sea. Yeah, do you really believe that? Sorry to bring things back to 9/11 again.
Well,
never forget, you know?
All right, so yeah, especially like in the northwest portion of our state, you know, your average person's probably fairly conservative. That's just the way things are out there. So they're finding they don't like this stuff because it's like their private properties, their rights have been encroached upon in that respect. How do they, I guess, you know, this is like eminent domain for a private purpose, right? How are they trying to sell that as like a legitimate use of eminent domain?
Because of the jobs that they will be creating, the temporary jobs, I should note, and also the more long-term jobs through the ethanol industry, and because of the reduction in carbon going into the atmosphere. Dakota Access, when that pipeline was approved, they used a very similar argument around like the economics and the importance of creating jobs for out-of-state workers that really don't benefit Iowans in any way. In fact, when Dakota Access came through, so many of their workers were utilizing the Ames food bank that they ran out of food. Like they couldn't provide food to the people of Ames because out-of-state workers were cleaning them out.
Oh, because I was going to say, you know, it benefits the state because those guys eat lunch at the gas station every day, so like they're like a boon to the Casey's economy, but they weren't even paying them enough to afford lunch.
Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah. So the Dakota Access Pipeline was a few years ago now. So I would imagine that there's maybe some data we could look at to see how this has economically benefited the people who live in the path of the pipeline. Any benefits to the people?
I will say I live very close to the pipeline, right past my town. I haven't noticed any changes, except they did make a big donation to our local EMTs, and they were able to add new locks to the ambulance building. So I appreciate that, Dakota Access. Great job. Didn't really make up for the fact that, your private security firm was stalking and targeting people and just using insane surveillance tactics. But hey, yeah, appreciated the check. And really, that's the same kind of thing with Summit. They have like community grants that they'll give out to buy favor amongst communities, while at the same time, they are not only wasting resources because like they will bring out the sheriffs when they try and do surveys of people's land and that sort of thing. And just all sorts of different things that they really are not contributing anything to our society in a positive way, at least lots of negatives. But I think like in that same vein, though, with Dakota Access, people watch that and a lot of folks, really paid attention to the damages to the land. I mean, if you look on Google Earth right now, you can follow the Dakota Access Pipeline from corner to corner of the state just by looking at the crops, because the yields still are not the same, because generally they compacted the soil with all of the heavy equipment right. And they mixed the different soil types. So topsoil was mixed in with subsoil and whatnot, and continues to impact yields. And that's one of the big drawbacks for farmers in this case, I think, along with a lot of damage to tile lines. We know Iowa has tile lines everywhere, and they're going to be crossing a whole lot of it. And once a tile line is broken, it doesn't ever go back to the way it was, even if you repair it. And so there's a lot of animosity and anger over just what it will do to the livelihoods of these farmers and their tenants.
Yeah, when you bring up the effects on land, we should probably also talk about how, especially with the Dakota Access Pipeline, a big driving force behind the protests of that pipeline were the complete disregard for like indigenous people and their land rights. Is there anything similar going on right now with like Summit or any of the other pipeline companies?
To some extent, part of the reason that Summit was denied up in North Dakota is because, just like Dakota Access, they originally planned to route through Bismarck, which, of course, very urban area, lots of people there that opposed the pipeline. And then they rerouted it and it went through Standing Rock territory. Yeah. And that's when the tribes really got involved. Summit has to come up with a new route in North Dakota. Will they go through Standing Rock? I have a feeling they're going to do their darndest not to, because of what happened with Dakota Access. Sure. There has been some tribal input on the pipelines, not as much as we saw with Dakota Access at this point, but I think it's going to continue to grow, especially like up in Minnesota. They've got a pretty solid group. Indigenous Environmental Network has also been chipping in and doing some work, but Iowa's just kind of tough because the pipelines don't really go through they're not by like Tama or anything. So it's a bit more difficult to kind of garner that interest when there's so many other issues that are affecting folks to.
Yeah. Silver lining, they're not blasting through, tribal land.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. Instead, it's all of these rural communities. And it's interesting because most rural communities are not considered high consequence areas, HCAs, by the federal oversight agency that oversees pipeline safety. And so like they might, make recommendations around safety if this pipeline were going like right through downtown Des Moines. But because it's, going by Erling, Iowa, we don't really care. Those people can be sacrificed for Bruce Rostetter's bottom line.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I guess it's just a numbers game, like the pipeline has to go somewhere. So kill as few people as you can and we'll approve that plan.
We saw RFK Jr.'s. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's the scary thing, too, is they have to do all of this modeling to show, like, if the pipeline were to rupture in this area, how far would the plume spread? How many people would be impacted? All that. And they have repeatedly refused to release that modeling. I mean, we've been asking for it for, I want to say, over a year, and they have denied it at every possible chance.
Because they know how bad that would look. Like, because they know how dangerous what they're building can be.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we saw RFK. Did you want to talk about that?
Well, I just was going to say, we saw RFK Jr. at the Iowa State Fair. We were doing our due diligence as very serious reporters. And he brought out Dennis Kucinich to bring a chart of the carbon capture pipelines proposed through Iowa. And that was the first thing I noticed, was that it was avoiding every major metropolitan area in Iowa. Not that there's that many, but that's all I was going to say.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that like in your position as an organizer with Bold Alliance, you probably don't want to like endorse any political candidates, but I don't know how aware you are of like RFK Jr.'s campaign and how he has taken up the pipeline issue as like a campaign message. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, thanks to Steve King. He let me know all about it.
Wow, that's great.
Actually, yeah, it's not. We were both just at the utilities board hearing one day, and he mentioned it to me, which I greatly appreciated. And there's been a number of presidential candidates who have either asked for more info, or in a lot of ways, frankly, they want to use our existing groups to garner support for their campaigns.
Yeah, finding ways to pander.
Yep. It is a kind of hot topic. So I do think RFK is probably more informed than on this issue than most of the candidates. But it's interesting. And I mean, I can't say it's not what we want to happen. We want this to be, talked about on the national stage. So more power to anybody that's willing to take it on.
Yeah, it is interesting how this is like both major parties have elements within them that can appeal to this subject. So yeah, Steve King is sort of an outsider figure within the Republican Party now. But actually, where are you located? Just out of curiosity.
I'm in Rockwell City, which is kind of between Fort Dodge and Storm Lake.
Okay, so you live around Steve King country. So
yep.
How, I guess my outsider perspective is that Steve King, though he's been sort of ousted from mainstream politics, he still holds a lot of sway in Republican politics in Northwest Iowa, right? So if he cares about this pipeline thing, do you think he can have like some real influence on like what the people actually empower do about this?
I don't know how like the top leaders treat King. I'm just not privy to that. Don't hang around those folks, surprisingly. They haven't invited to make me a hamburger yet, but I'm waiting. I'll answer that call. No, but he has a lot of influence over just your typical voter, I would say. I mean, he is, I will say, a very charismatic guy.
In his way, for sure.
Yeah. And he's also been just talking about eminent domain since, 2002 at least. So this really is kind of one of his issues. So I think people, at least within the conservative, voting bloc, do kind of look to him as an authority figure in certain ways. But, I will hold other thoughts to myself on that one.
Yeah. Because, it just seems like the establishment Republicans in Iowa, they don't care about this, right? They're not going to come out and oppose Summit and their proposed pipeline, unless you know of counterexamples to that.
Pat Grassley. His home county is, they're so well organized and they're so against the pipelines. And they actually were able to like coordinate when the last election cycle, when he needed to get petition signatures to get on the ballot, they were so well coordinated. He wasn't getting the petition signatures from his community that he needed to get on the ballot.
Wow.
And same thing, like he's apparently, I heard, having trouble getting yard signs put up because he hasn't stopped the pipelines.
Wow, okay.
there's a lot of pressure, and he did. I mean, I will hand it to him. In this one instance, he did help move a bill through the Iowa House. The Iowa House did pass a really watered down version that would have restricted the use of eminent domain for the carbon pipelines, but it was not taken up by the Senate, which certainly has nothing to do with Kim Reynolds stepping in and nothing to do with the tens of thousands of dollars that Senate Majority Leader Jack Whitver has received in donations from the companies.
Surely not. No way.
No connection.
So was that enough for like the Pat Grassley constituents, or do they see through this, that he just proposed that and got it through the House for his own political benefit, knowing that it would be shot down afterwards?
Oh, they're still expecting him to do a lot more and do whatever he can to push through legislation this next session. Yeah.
So I've been following your Twitter recently because you've been like really shedding a lot of light on like these hearings. What exactly are these? Who are hosting these hearings with Summit?
So it is being held by the Iowa Utilities Board. That is a 3-person board appointed by the governor. And they essentially it's their duty to ultimately either grant or deny Summit's application to construct a pipeline, and they can also grant or deny their right to use eminent domain. The interesting thing about the Utilities Board, however, is that back in late April, early May, 2 of the 3 existing board members were replaced with new appointees. And since that began, we've really seen this process just fast-tracked, and frankly, they've just made an entire mockery of what this process should be. Just today, they came out with a new motion demanding the kind of main like landowner lawyer, Brian Jordy of Domina Law out of Omaha. He represents hundreds of landowners across the Midwest at these hearings, including, a couple hundred here in Iowa. And they have decided that he needs to let the board know when all of his clients and his expert witnesses will be appearing at the hearings, like in what order, which is great because there's only like 200 witnesses that he has to call, literally 200. And
these are just people like they're just showing up at these hearings like on their own accord. It's not really him organizing their appearances. Okay.
So they're largely his clients that will have to testify, and then like just a variety of different experts on this issue that are helping to like build the case of why the pipeline shouldn't be approved. So 200 folks, he has to get them the like order that they will all be testifying in 2 days. And they have not actually given a schedule for when those timeline will occur. So it could be, next week he has to have these 200 people there, or it could be in November. It's a great situation. The even better than that, though, beyond just like the little manipulations and really just unbelievable ways that they are going about this. I had a landowner today tell me that he wouldn't trust the IUB to plan his 3-year-old grandson's birthday party. And I agree. It would be a disaster. The interesting thing is that the IUB really is catering to Summit in this process. So, for example, rather than hiring their own private security firm, they contracted out with the same security firm that Summit uses. So the folks that have been going with surveyors as they try and access people's property and are there to protect surveyors are now at the Iowa Utilities Board hearing with their guns, bulletproof vests, because of course, all these 80-year-old farmers are all terrorists, certainly. I think the ethanol industry better watch out because they are a national security threat, and we know where ethanol stands on that one. But then they also, at the same time, as using like the same security company that's really been intimidating and like, for example, another landowner lawyer They towed her vehicle. She was actually using a van as a mobile office, had, her bed, her medications, all of her clients' documents in it. And they intentionally towed it because it was suspicious, because it was parked in the parking lot.
Oh, wow. It wasn't even like parked illegally. It was just like, we don't like the look of this van.
We had to call the chief of police of Fort Dodge and supervisors and like state legislators just to be able to get her mobile office out of the tow company's possession. It was a nightmare. And that's exactly what they intended to do. Like Summit they're playing dirty pool. I mean, there's no other way around it. They also don't let us stand during the hearing. You have to sit the entire time for 8-10 hour days, and the chairs are a crime against humanity. They're very uncomfortable. I have the hips of a 90-year-old woman now.
Yeah, just from attending these hearings. Yeah. I have to imagine, if it's going to be an 8 to 10 hour engagement, you have to get up to like use the bathroom and stuff like that. Do they let you do that, or?
Yeah, but you cannot linger at like the back of the room.
They time you.
Yeah. And then another day, they decided that we were no longer allowed to use cell phones or laptops for no reason. Like there was no disruptions.
Yeah.
But then after we raised a stink about it, suddenly that decision was reversed. So hey, I'll take that minor win. But yeah, same with like we weren't allowed to bring our own water into the building on the first day. Like they would literally make us dump it out and go fill it up with the bathroom sink water.
Airport security.
Right. And then they're tougher than the TSA. I'm telling you.
Sounds like it, yeah.
And then the next day they started selling bottled water for $1. And now it's complimentary. So it's just
that's
bonkers.
Just so transparent. Like you can't bring in your own. We got some right here. Like it's a fucking county fair.
And we are grown adults. And like this venue is the same place that Bruce Rastetter hosted an informational event about like trying to convince landowners to sign voluntary easements. I attended it. They served food. We were allowed drinks. Like it's not a venue decision. It is purely the Iowa Utility Board's decision not to let us drink anything more than water, which is miserable.
Well, when he was trying to convince them to sign over the rights, it was the carrot approach, and now you're getting the stick, right? Got to beat the populace into submission.
You're not wrong. They gave away swag at that event, and I blended in. And I have the nicest pair of leather work gloves I've ever owned in my life, and they are like branded Summit Carbon Solutions. I got the last pair, so sorry guys, but I use them because they are nice.
Yeah. That's pretty
something
cool.
Out of
Yeah. That seems like it costs a bit more than like a fan, like a little piece of paper stapled to a tongue depressor. The gloves sound a little fancier.
Even their keychains are high quality, but my favorite thing that they have done to date is up in South Dakota. Whenever we have a rally, we encourage people to wear red. Like wearing red is kind of like the opposition color. And that's how we like are able to spot each other. And that's how, even if we don't necessarily know each other face to face, we know, okay, we're together.
Red for stop.
Yep. A cohesive image, right?
Yeah.
Up in South Dakota, Summit tried copying us, only they took it a step further. Instead of just wearing a matching color, they wore matching cowboy hats. And I am just dying to get my hands on one. And you know what? It was effective because South Dakota did not pass any legislation last session to stop the pipeline. So that is my next proposal is cowboy hats.
Yeah. They were so impressed by the fashion that, these guys know what's up. We got to let them do what they want. They look nice. Evan, do you have any more questions? I feel like we've got a lot out of Emma tonight.
Just one broad one. I don't know if you're equipped to answer it really, but are there any, so like there's a lot of talk about geoengineering ourselves out of climate change, and that's kind of what these carbon capture pipelines are part of. Is there any of that is in any way promising, or like I assume that Justin's opinion is the same, but my opinion is that it's basically a way to make a shiny nickel in front of someone's face while they can say, like, we're not actually going to do anything to like change patterns of consumption that are actually driving climate change. Mm-hmm. So that's a very loaded question, but am I wrong into thinking that?
No, that is exactly spot on. Like, whether it's through hydrogen or carbon capture or whatever you want, like, none of this has any real proven ability to work. In fact, the only thing that's like proven about carbon capture pipelines is that they're proven to fail time and time again. They have never met like the goals that they've set out to capture the emissions that they said they would. They've never, in a lot of cases, even had the funding to fully be implemented because it's such expensive technology that really at the end of the day doesn't change the situation we're in. Because like you said, we have to actually change how we operate in this world. You can't just take a waste product from one spot and move it to another and assume that that's solving your problem.
Okay, so we can't just see the clouds and then like little reflective nanoparticles in the atmosphere to like block out the sun and like, or like detonate tactical nuclear weapons to create sort of like nuclear winter situations. So that's not a good idea.
I mean, I can't say whether it's a good idea, but I'd stick around to find out.
Yeah, don't knock
Just
it till you try it.
Give it a shot. Yeah.
I guess that's kind of what they're hoping for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're
give
pushing.
us a chance.
The best conspiracy theory out there is that this is actually all the workings of Bill Gates, because Bill Gates supports carbon capture and Bill Gates also loves to buy up farmland. Mm-hmm. And so what's really going on here is that Bill Gates is behind all of these pipelines, and one of these days after they're built, he's going to intentionally rupture them all so he can kill everybody in the Midwest and take all of our prime farmland.
Oh, wow.
So spread that around too. Yeah, it's a good one.
That's a brutal one. That's like...
that's crazy.
Like depopulation conspiracy theories are pretty extreme. Well, Emma, I feel like I learned a lot. That was really fun, especially the Steve King stuff. I'm so happy that you like had some Steve King insight. I was not expecting that. So, probably like a few hundred people are going to listen to this. So if you had like complete mind control over the few hundred people that are listening right now, what would you command them to do? Like, what can they do to help you in your mission? Do you just want them to follow you on Twitter? Anything like that?
A lot of help would come from just talking with people. We've talked about how this is like a pretty hot button issue, especially out in like rural places and people that are directly impacted. But everybody is impacted in some way or another, whether it's because your tax dollars are going to line the pockets of Bruce Rastetter instead of to your own community, or because we're investing in false climate solutions or whatever. Some way, shape, or form, everybody is impacted, but we're not hearing from a lot of folks. There's still a lot of folks that have no idea that a carbon pipeline is any different than like an oil pipeline, or that carbon pipelines are even a thing they should be worried about. And so if you can just talk to folks in your community about this, that would be a major help, because if we're really at the end of the day going to stop this thing, we need as many bodies on our side as possible, because unfortunately, we don't have the backing of like BlackRock like Navigator does. So it's a tough spot to be in. So we need as much support as humanly possible, whether it's just talking with your mailman or your hairdresser or whoever, or writing a letter to the editor to just help spread the word. And any support, showing up to the hearings. These summit hearings are taking place in Fort Dodge every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, at least through September. Pretty likely going to go on longer than that. And then, of course, we've got the legislative session coming up here too soon in January. And we will be doing everything we can to try and get a real foundational shifting bill through the legislature to really tackle this problem.
Yeah.
So talk to your legislators.
Yeah. Well, on the BlackRock thing, this is maybe a long shot, but if anyone out there is listening to this and you have like several $1 million and you can afford to hire like a private security militia to help out Emma and her crew, please, reach out and we'll hook you up because, BlackRock is pretty threatening. So if we could have our own kind of BlackRock, that would be great. So
I'm there for it. Great ask.
Great and realistic.
Got to intimidate them back after their intimidation tactics.
Yeah. Well, Emma Schmit, thank you. You've been a wonderful guest. This is, I really love that. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I really love every opportunity to talk about this. So great time.
I can tell you do a great job.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. Everybody out there, thanks for listening, and do what Emma just told you to do. Talk to people, write a letter, go yell at your state senator or whatever. Because carbon capture pipelines, if you weren't paying attention, they're very bad, and we should stop them. So that's the message tonight. Thank you for listening to Rock Hard Caucus, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Hey, it's Lucky. Make it as Lucky Charms.
Hi, with me, Rainbow Magic.
We've got magic too,
But can you make heart stars and horseshoes, clovers and blue moons, pots of gold and rainbows, and me red balloons?
Well, not exactly.
Ha-ha!
But like magic, we can make them disappear.
Marshmallowy Lucky Charms, a tasty part of this good breakfast.
That's me Lucky Charms.
They're magically delicious.